Hey there guys, alright, today we are back with some more extra credits. This time we're going to dive into their 1918 flu pandemic series, Emergence, number 1. Before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love it if you joined the Discord and followed me over at Twitch. Not really going to waste any more time before we dive into the flu pandemic. I really don't know. I know a bit about 1918 flu. But I'm curious how they are going to cover this. I wonder if they're going to talk about how pretty much discussion of the flu was kind of suppressed in most countries except for Spain. Like, that's really the biggest thing I know about it. But let's go ahead and dive right in.
September 1918. Camp Devens.
This is a new voice. This is a different voice.
Massachusetts. The man on the autopsy table has turned blue.
Oh,
Dr.
no.
William H. Welch nods to proceed. His colleagues reach for the bone saw and begin to open the rib cage. The man's lungs are heavy. Welch and his colleagues lean in as they're opened. The lungs are so full of fluid that it's traveled up the trachea. The man had drowned in his own body,
Ew.
just like the others. Welch needs air. He opens the door and stumbles around men lying on the floor. There are no longer enough beds in the hospital. 6,000 men crammed in a facility meant for 1,200. And they're turning blue.
Bum, 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 bum.
This is a horror story, one of the most frightening in history. In 1918, a new disease emerged. We still don't know exactly how or where it first began infecting humans, but within months, it would spread across the planet.
It's crazy that this is one of the most, this is probably, I would say it is the second most talked about disease in history, just because it's so close to the modern day that I think it gets talked about a lot more. Right, we have the bubonic plague, and then I would say we have the 1918 flu pandemic here. You could argue maybe, what's another one really that gets a lot of attention? No, I wouldn't say Justinian's is up there. Justinian's is up there, top 10, but I don't know if I'd put it even top 5. It might just barely squeak into the top 5, but yeah. I mean, then we have the spread of disease. I mean, the spread of disease in the Americas is pretty well known, so maybe that could be third. Could bump up to second place. But anyways, yeah. It's crazy that this happened in 1918, and we don't know where it really originated from.
Planet, from the trenches of the Western Front to the most...
Obviously, I'm sure scientists and historians have their guesses as to where it originated from, but from what I understand, I don't think we have it as solidly nailed down to its origins as we do, say, the bubonic plague.
Most remote villages on Earth. It infected a third of the world's population and killed between 50 and 100 million people. To put that...
I think I've heard the typical number that I've heard killed would be 55 million.
In perspective, the low estimate would make it twice as deadly as World War I, while the high estimate would mean it killed more than both world wars combined.
Yeah.
Between 3 and 6% of the global population died within 18 months. It was the first...
Only 18? I thought this flu pandemic lasted into the 20s.
Modern plague, turning our interconnected world against us by spreading through shipping lanes, rail lines, and the arteries of industrialized war. Yet it was also the...
I was sick before it was cool. Oh, God.
First pandemic of the scientific age, where doctors could, to some extent, understand what was happening and stand against the infection, though they lacked the tools to stop it. So in 1918, while researchers couldn't really see viruses, they knew such things must exist. They had no idea that, unlike the bacteria they could see in their microscopes, flu was not alive in any way humans understood it. Just a bunch of unstable genetic material that possessed a cell, forcing it to pump out billions of copies of itself. And with each cell infected, a minority of those new viruses mutated into something more infectious, more deadly. A microorganism that, through the randomness of natural selection, became progressively better at catching and killing as it passed through each host. In its wake, it altered a world war, drove languages extinct, and shattered the sense of invulnerability that modern medicine had begun to cultivate. And when the nightmare ended, the world did what any person does when they wake from a dream. It forgot. But forgetting is something we can't afford, because the virus that ravaged the world in 1918 is still out there, still mutating, and it will return. Yet,
when was this episode released?
Despite its impacts, we still don't know where the pandemic originated, but there are theories. Canada, 1917. A train races across the plains. Military guards are instructed to keep civilians away from the locomotive. If they see what's inside, there may be a riot. These cars, designed for cattle, contain the men of the Chinese Labor Corps, pawns in a political gambit. Until recently, the young, fragile Republic of China had remained neutral in the First World War. With so many foreign countries holding territory within its borders, joining the conflict risks making their homeland a battleground. But neutrality was not tenable. Japan, one of the allies, had used the war as pretext to move troops into Chinese territory and demand control of the Chinese government. To thread the political needle, China had declared war on Germany. Hopefully, the other allies will now protect China from Japanese aggression and give it a seat at the post-war negotiating table. It may even get its occupied territory back. But to maintain a shred of neutrality, these Chinese recruits are barred from combat. They would dig trenches, lug ammunition, and clear minefields. So here they are, shipped to Canada, crammed on train cars, and traveling overland to a troop ship in Halifax. But there's something else among them. A respiratory disease that had ravaged northern China the previous year. A winter sickness severe enough that some victims coughed blood and turned blue. First, one recruit begins to cough, then another. One by one, they fall ill with splitting headaches and chills. Crammed into the cattle cars, there's nowhere to run, nowhere to isolate the sick. They beg the guards to let them get off and seek medical attention. But due to the rampant anti-Chinese sentiment in Canada, the guards have their orders to keep the passengers a secret. By the time they reach Halifax, 3,000 have to be placed in quarantine. Doctors give the sick nothing but castor oil for sore throats and load the rest of the recruits onto the troop ships for France. Those men aren't sick. Yet. But flu victims are contagious days before presenting symptoms, meaning the British Empire has just delivered pandemic flu to the trenches. If that is, it was flu. Because another emergence is about to occur in the unlikeliest of places. March 4th, 1918, Camp Funston, Kansas.
I've heard this
theory. Every military
theory.
base in America, Camp Funston is overcrowded. The second largest training center in the country, Funston's 56,000 men live in barracks and tents, each waiting to be rotated to duty in the US or France. Diseases always break out when recruits muster for war, so it's no surprise when a private, a cook no less, reports for sick call with influenza. By noon, 107 other soldiers have joined him. Within 3 weeks, it'll be over 1,100. Alarming, sure, but this is wartime. Camp outbreaks happen. Even as 20% of the patients develop pneumonia and 38 die, doctors see nothing abnormal. But they're missing a key piece of the puzzle. A month before, and 300 miles away, the lone doctor in Haskell County, Kansas, had watched flu kill dozens of his strongest, healthiest patients. Its rapid pace and high fatality rate alarmed him so much that he contacted the Public Health Service and published an alert in the National Health Journal. But no one listened. The paper's obituary page was unusually busy that February, but alongside the reports of death and illness were heartwarming articles. Soldiers from Haskell County were departing for boot camp or visiting home one last time before deployment, all headed to Camp Funston, and from there to France. 2 weeks after the first case at Funston, 10% of recruits were reporting sick at 2 camps in Georgia. By the end of the month, 24 of the 36 largest military bases in America had cases, along with 30 major cities. No one noticed. Yet. Army Medical Department, Washington, D.C. Dr. William H. Welch was tracking an epidemic. One of the country's most famous doctors, Welch had helped drag American medicine into the modern age. He helped found the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, spread the use of microscopes, and organized the Rockefeller Institute, the country's first dedicated medical laboratory. His work had helped transform America from a nation of country doctors to a titan of scientific medicine, able to compete with the Pasteur Institute in France and the Koch Institute in Berlin. Because of him, America had joined the age of the microscope and the vaccine. A bright world where doctors could both see diseases and kill them. The last few decades had brought vaccines for smallpox, rabies, anthrax, diphtheria, and meningitis. Researchers at the Rockefeller Institute were taking the first steps towards limb reattachment and organ transplantation. Some optimists even predicted a future without communicable disease. And America needed that scientific power now more than ever. Even before the war, Welch delivered a message to the Army Surgeon General. When mobilization happens, you'll have an epidemic. You'll need to recruit the best doctors and microbiologists. You'll need researchers, train cars outfitted as mobile research laboratories, a stockpile of vaccines and antitoxins, anything to be ready. When the war started, the Surgeon General didn't bother recruiting Welch and his researchers. He just enfolded the Rockefeller Institute into the Army. And here it was, the epidemic that Welch had feared. He could see it moving on the map from camp to camp, and it had killed nearly 6,000 already. He'd sent...
I like how, you know, the people that devote their lives to studying this kind of thing typically are ahead of the game and can see the traces of it, and do typically send out warnings of, hey, maybe we should pay attention to this kind of thing. This could come and do some more damage. And then they're like never listened to until it's too late. Man, what parallel could this have right to the modern age? Whoa.
Researchers to chart its spread and battle the secondary cases of pneumonia that were...
Humanity never fucking learns. This is why we're gonna fucking get ourselves killed by getting the world too fucking hot.
The real killer in most epidemics. They'd all warned the Army that this would happen if they overcrowded the camps. But no one listened. Welch had dispatched an experimental vaccine that fought one form of bacterial pneumonia, as well as a serum that cut the death rates by half. Results of the test looked good, if not 100% effective. It was proving a successful response. But there was a problem. Because the epidemic that Welch was fighting to contain wasn't flu. It was measles. He'd seen reports of influenza spreading too, but influenza was seasonal, something that was expected and would go away. Doctors weren't even obligated to report cases to the Public Health Service. So the prospect of a measles outbreak seemed much more serious, especially with recruits grouped together in training camps and 36,000 of the nation's doctors deployed in France. So as Welch...
Damn, 36,000?
Fought measles. Infected American troops boarded troop ships. They packed into the holds until each converted ocean liner held twice the normal load of passengers. They pulled away from the dock, waving farewell to families and loved ones on shore, and turned towards Europe. It was in the bloodstream now, not just of the men, but of the world.
All right. That was 1918 flu pandemic emergence extra history number 1. This is a weak episode, I'd say. I don't know. I don't know if it's because of this person doing it, and it just threw me off my game because I'm just so used to the other guy, or it was because of the way they told the story here. I'm not sure. We'll see how it progresses in part 2 when we get to it. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.